I was born in General Hospital up on Byrne Avenue. I was born and raised in Cincinnati. As soon as I graduated from high school, the next week they sent a postal card and I was inducted into the Navy. To get off that train, we asked, where are we stopping here? See, this is where you're going. We didn't know where it was. And that was Port Chicago, California.
It was a Monday, a hot July day, and for some reason, a day that I felt a great foreboding, and I don't know why.
The sky lit up, and it's just like the sun rose. Everything was bright. You can see all the buildings for a second.
Port Chicago came into existence in the aftermath of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the realization that the United States was going to be going to war against Japan and had to rev up for that. They needed now a major ammunition facility. And at that time, the practice was to use black sailors for jobs like ammunition loading, unloading ships.
The ships came in from down out of the Oakland shipyard and came up to Port Chicago, and that's where we had to load ships. That's all we did.
Blacks were not really welcomed into combat.
These were men who thought that they were being trained to go off and fight a war. However, they were very proud that they were able to support the war.
It was a thing that caused frustration among us because they wasn't treating us the way we were supposed to be treated.
The Jim Crow laws were laws that basically separated the races in the South. The entire society was racially divided between blacks and whites. Port Chicago was exactly like that. The barracks for the black sailors were segregated. The work was segregated. One group would load for 8 hours and then it'd be replaced by another group. And they worked around the clock, The officers came up with this idea of encouraging competition between the work groups to get higher output. Which, if you stop even for just a second and think about that, that's an insane idea.
They would actually bet one another and compete from one shift to another, which was not a safe thing to do.
We had an assignment. They ran a 24-hour clock. Whenever ships would come up there empty from down in Oakland shipyard, we had to load them.
July 17, 1944 began as a day like any other at the base. As the ships were being loaded late in the evening, something went wrong. A first smaller explosion that seemed to occur on the ship itself, and then the big one as all the bombs in the ship went off like one big bomb.
There were 320 men who died in that explosion. There were about 400 who were injured.
And it was the worst home front disaster during all of World War II. The next day, when you look at photographs, you realize that the pier was gone. The Quinault Victory, which had just arrived, they could see the stern of the ship turned over. What was left was sticking up out of the water.
But they never admit to what caused that explosion.
I had an uncle who served at Port Chicago. He was sitting in a chair next to his bunk. He said he was thrown against the wall, a wall of windows. The windows shattered. He said they worked for 3 days cleaning up. He said he'd find a hand in a glove and a foot in a shoe, and how horrible it was. He said, but they didn't stop. He said they didn't go to sleep. The third day after he finally got a chance to lay down, he discovered he had glass in his back, but he didn't know it all that time.
The bodies which were sufficiently intact to be identified, some of them are in Golden Gate Cemetery. The handful of sailors buried up there are all that were found.
So our job is for people to know about the story, try to correct some of the misstatements and misperceptions about the story, and to honor the men who died there and who served there. The story will not be forgotten.
And I got thrown out my bunk. I had scars on my hand but from glass, but nothing else. But the night that explosion, I jumped out my bunk. So we ran to where they had Marines who guard the place, and there was nothing there. And that's where I left, and I went to school in New York City. I went up there and I went and applied for Columbia University, and I spent 2 years there and get my master's in education. Now I got on this long-term sub with the Cincinnati Public School. I taught physical education in school, and I just moved on up from there. I was a principal up at Aikens High School. You know what that is?